Here we are with another episode of Mind Matters, and this time we're talking all about anchors, what they are, what it means, what you can do with them, and how you can actually use them on a day-to-day basis to change your life. And that sounds a bit cheesy, but it's kind of true. So speaking of massive anchors, Paul, hi!
I love that you just introduced me as a massive anchor. That amuses me.
Sorry, I'm a slip of the tongue. You know a lot about anchors, right? You're an massive anchor expert. That's what I meant.
So I'm an expert in massive anchors.
Sure, let's go with that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about any of this now.
So welcome to the show. For those of you who don't know, Mind Matters is a almost monthly waffly conversation between me and Paul. That's really all it is. But Paul has a lot of experience with the mind and manipulating people, and normally uses his powers for good.
Most of the time, yeah.
Let's call it chaotic good. And I also have a good understanding of the mind and manipulating people. But what I do is I help people to manipulate themselves in a positive way using therapy and coachy stuff.
So we're talking about massive anchors and manipulating ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
What
could possibly go wrong? As you can tell, Paul and I are always very serious on these Monday afternoon calls.
Highly professional.
Yeah.
Highly.
So Paul, there'll be people watching. I say there'll be people watching. I'm hoping at some point in the future there will be. No one's currently watching us live, which is unusual. We normally have a few people tune in straight off. But yeah, anyway, there'll be people watching at some point in the future thinking, what are they waffling on about? They haven't even started, and I'm already lost. What's an anchor? So I'll let you describe it. What's an anchor, Paul?
Right, I'm going to say what an anchor is to me. To me, it's a way of making a physical something have an emotional effect on you. So for me, I can make a physical movement eventually make my brain change the way that I feel and see something that I'm about to do. So if I need to, I can create an anchor around pushing that thumb and that middle finger together. That then brings an emotional state across me, which makes me relax and feel comfortable and just, kind of chilling a bit. And seriously, because I've trained my brain to know this, literally all I'm doing is pushing them together, and all of a sudden I go, I got this. So that's what an anchor is to me. But as you know, mate, I'm horrendous at reading on these things and reading too many other people's opinions on it. So I'd love to know what you think they are, and if mine is technically correct.
Yeah, very much so. Well, yours is technically correct. That's the first thing. My explanation of it isn't actually all that dissimilar. Where the technicality could come in, if I want to sound posh and fancy and use the big words, I would say an anchor is a conditioned emotional response. That's the jargon term for it, right? And to take it away from humans, because humans, we're brilliant. We're actually very simple, but we're also really, really complicated on top of that. But only because we decide that we are, pretty much. We kind of create this layer, this complexity for ourselves. So let's make it simpler. Let's look at puppies, partly because any excuse to mention puppies is always a good one, right?
But first, how's your puppy?
My puppy is just wonderful. I'm almost at that point wondering that maybe I'm doing something wrong because the training's just going too well.
Right, hold on. That sounded very, very stereotypically human there.
Yes, it did. Sorry.
It's going so well that you think something's wrong. That's amazing.
Isn't it beautiful how we do this, right? No,
yeah.
It's almost that point where you think, have I missed something here? Am I? Because, okay, so an example of this, massive tangent alert. Whoop, whoop. We need one of them. We need like a little whoop, whoop, tangent alert siren. When I first learned to play the sax, yes, that's right, I play the saxophone.
I did not know you played the sax. That's awesome.
Not very well. But when I first started playing the saxophone, I actually picked it up really quickly and really easily. but I was also really lazy because I am. If I can do something more efficiently, I will. It's just I'm very good at confusing more efficiently with just more quickly, not necessarily getting the better result with that speed. So I got quite lazy with the fingering. Because I taught myself. Yes, that's right. We're talking about massive anchors, manipulating ourselves, and fingering now can be added to the list.
And
So
puppies. But
and
there's nothing
puppies,
bad about puppies, is there?
gorgeous puppies. So yeah, I kind of learned to take shortcuts, and then when I wanted to play things that needed like actual notes that you would expect to be able to play but involve putting your fingers in weird places, that only works if you've been stretching your hand the right way. And I kind of almost had to go back to square one to start doing it the right way, because it turns out sometimes there's a reason there's a right way, and it's not always best to just cut corners. Who knew? But anyway, yes, so there's a massive tangent. What was I saying? Puppies. They when you're training a puppy,
Should we just give up on the real meaning for today? Because we've both just lost it about 3 times each so far.
do you know what? I'm loving this. Can you tell I had a long weekend? So yeah, conditioned emotional response. When you're training a puppy, you're almost completely relying on these conditioned emotional responses. And as with humans, with puppies, they happen. Some of them are trained and intentional, and some of them are just accidental. For example, you say the W word, walkies, and instantly puppy goes, I know what that means. And they get excited and they start running around. Sometimes it's not even a word or a command. It's you get the lead out, and they know the lead means they're going to go on a walk and they get to chase squirrels in the park,
Yeah.
or whatever it might be that a particular puppy loves. Now, we do the same thing. We have these conditioned emotional responses, as in a thing happens, we have a response to it, which is emotional, and it has been conditioned for us to act that way or react that way because we know what to expect from it, because we've created that for ourselves, or it's been created for us by our environment and has that influence upon us. In your example there, what you've done is, rather than a naturally occurring conditioned response, you've taken charge of that, and much like I do with my clients, created that trigger, that anchor point, that basically what you've, I imagine the way that you created that for yourself, please correct me if I'm wrong because I'd love to know, but I imagine the way you created that for yourself was pretty much to put yourself into the state of mind that you wanted to be in, probably through imagining associated scenarios that lead you to feel that way. Then you anchored it to that trigger, creating that ability to then reverse engineer it and do the trigger to feel the feelings.
Exactly that. So if I know I'm going to walk on stage and I need to feel empowered and ready to take on whatever happens to me on stage, so when I wanted to put that one in place, I remembered the feeling of being center stage with the lights on me and the audience standing up and going nuts, because there's just not a feeling like it. You just kind of go, oh my word, this is amazing. So I reimagined that scenario, made it lifelike, made it colorful, made it as loud as possible as I could in my own mind. And that's when I started pushing that finger and that thumb together. And then if you start the loop of the more you push, the stronger it feels, the more you want to push. And you just create that lovely loop of it just gets more and more powerful every time you do it. Now to the point that I'm actually careful that I don't do that too often, because I'm already a cheeky git enough. So I have to kind of calm it down a bit nowadays. But back in the day when I was scared of walking on stage, it was amazing. It helped so much. Now I just walk out kind of relaxed, kind of calm and ready for anything. But yeah, I love it. So I was listening to a podcast. I did a lot of driving last week, and I listened to a podcast. And if anyone's interested,
you mean after you'd finished the most recent episode of the Mind Affinity podcast, of course.
And yes, and Newton's Nuggets, of course, because we both listen to our own ones. So, yeah, I do.
Do you?
Yeah, I do, because I kind of figure it's the only way I can learn.
I was going to say I do as well, but then I do while I'm editing, and I realized that someone else does your editing, so it makes sense that you would then actually listen back to it when you're not editing it. Like,
yeah, so I listened back to teach myself which bits worked, which bits didn't work, and rehash again which bits worked for the guest as well, and which bits made the guest feel like they wanted to be there and they got more excited. So yeah, I do re-listen to our podcast. But anyway,
sorry,
after yeah, after listening to our podcasts, which there will be links for both up under here somewhere at some point.
yeah, because I'm
I
organized.
listened to. There's a guy called Jordan Harbinger, and really worth a listen. Really worth. I mean, absolutely makes my podcast look tiny in comparison, but it's brilliant. But he was listening. I was listening to him. Sorry,
size isn't everything.
thank you, mate. I knew I loved you. But anyway, I was listening to it, and he said about he had this trick for a while where he'd walk through a door frame, and as long as he walked through the door frame, he would then straighten his back, make his head higher, puff his chest out a bit more, and look more confident.
Yeah.
And he'd agreed to do this every time he walked through a door frame. Now, the funny thing is that we walk through door frames so often that he kept forgetting it. So what he did instead was he got a load of, the little Post-it notes. He got a load of them, and he'd just put them at eye height in every door frame around his house. So every time he'd walk along, he'd go, why is there a Post-it note? Oh, yeah, stand up, straighten up, chest out, makes you feel confident, walk through the door like you're the most confident person ever. And because he was walking through all of the doors in his own house so much, it taught his brain that every time you walk through a door frame, you feel more confident, you boost up, you get ready. So therefore, when he's going into networking events, when he's going into business meetings, he would slowly walk through a door frame, feel really confident, feel really great, have an amazing stance, and walk in there like the best version of him that he could be. And I sat there thinking, this is somebody who doesn't understand anchors describing anchors.
Yeah.
This is brilliant. And I just thought, what a lovely trick to have, bright yellow Post-it notes so that your brain goes, what's that? Oh, I need to do this. I'll do this now. Oh, it's in a door frame. Every door frame means this. And he just taught himself anchoring without knowing it.
It's powerful stuff, isn't it? But there's a flip side to it as well, right? As with everything, there's a light side and a dark side, if you will. Much like gaffer tape. Gaffer tape is like the Force from Star Wars. It has a light side, a dark side, and it holds things together. Anyway,
you've seen what I do with gaffer tape, so let's not.
If you haven't seen what Paul does with gaffer tape, then there's something I can't tell you about because it hasn't been announced yet, but you need to attend it. And I'll see if I can convince him to do his gaffer tape thing.
Would that be? Would I need to put something in my diary around about March next year?
You would hopefully already have it in your diary around about March next year, but we can't talk about that, Paul. So there is dark sides as well. Dark sides. There's a balance to everything, and
yeah,
what I would encourage everyone watching this to do right now, not right now, keep watching this right now, but after this. Set aside some time and have a look and have a think about what anchors you already have in place in your life that may not be serving you very well. That it could be something as simple as, actually, it could be something horrendous, like every time your partner comes home, it makes you feel a certain way. And if that certain way isn't a good thing, you've definitely got something to be aware of, right? And to deal with.
Yeah.
But I didn't mean to go quite down that extreme route, but it could be something so small and tiny. It could be a really useful thing. When the ad break comes on, you go and boil the kettle. You can create the positive ones. So, for example, you can decide that every time you boil the kettle, that's a reminder to take some time to breathe and relax and do your thing while you wait for the tea to brew rather than scrolling on your phone again. But scrolling on your phone is a great example. What is it? Bedtime? And you're in the habit that when the lights go out, your phone comes out. Is that an anchor for you? Is that something that triggers a certain behavior for you? Have a think about what behaviors you want to reduce, what you want to do less of, and identify, okay, what anchors do I already have in place that lead to those behaviors I want to do less of? And rather than just try and, maybe you could eliminate the anchor. Maybe you could just go, actually, I don't need to do that thing that happens before it, and I'll just stop doing it. That's okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe you could actually use that powerfully and positively. So you can go, well, I know, and I've recognized that every time X, then Z. So what I'm going to do now is every time X, I'm going to use that as a reminder to do Y instead. And suddenly you can use the very thing that you want to change as the catalyst, as the anchor almost within itself, to create the positive change that you want to see in your own life.
Mate, a friend of mine had a great example of this. Um, he used to dread going to one of his aunt's houses when he was a little kid, all the way to teenager. He'd hate going to their house. And as kind of newly formed adults, we talked about it and wondered why. And he said, as soon as I start the drive to that house, as soon as I'm sat in the car behind my dad, I feel dread and I'm worried and I'm bothered. And we talked about it a lot. And it all went back to when he was a kid. He went to that aunt's house. He did something that was dangerous and he could have harmed himself. And his aunt went ballistic and screamed at him and shouted because his aunt went through fear and she just saw,
Wanting to
her little nephew that she loves about to really hurt himself. So she went loud, quick, fast, really, really mean in that kid's eyes to my buddy. Now I'm talking with my buddy who's now late teenager, and so was I at the time. And he's saying, yeah, every time I start driving there, I feel dread. But it wasn't his aunt that he was worried about. It wasn't the place. But in his head, going to there meant that you would be scared as a scared little child that's being shouted at by someone that you love and you thought cared for you. But because of that one occasion, and because it was so emotional to him, that stuck with him until he was an early adult.
And the key part there is absolutely, it's not about logic. Forget about logic. It is emotional, right? And time again, I have clients and conversations with people who so often say this phrase. And anytime I hear this phrase, I generally have the same correction which I suggest to them. And that phrase that I hear a lot is, it's stupid, but, or I know it's stupid, or I feel stupid, da 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 da. Let's be really clear. Stupid has no place in a conversation about emotion. It's silly,
No.
yes, but it's not stupid, right? I feel this way. Everyone's justified in however they feel, right? I do this and I know it doesn't make sense. Well, that doesn't make it stupid that you do it because you know it doesn't make sense. It makes it silly. And silly's okay because we can all be a bit silly sometimes because we're human. And suddenly just changing that one word makes you realize it's not something to berate yourself about. It's not something to beat yourself up for. It's got nothing to do with your cognitive abilities. It's actually just a learned behavior or an emotional thing or some other thing that's going on. So you're right. It's not logical. It's not whether it's stupid or not. It's just a bit silly. And that's
No,
okay.
it's not. And you think so straight after that occasion when he got scared at his aunt's house,
Hmm.
you think every time they went to visit there afterwards, like every 2 weeks or so he's then getting in the car behind his dad, knowing the journey they're taking. He's now teaching his own brain to start to
This
get
is it.
scared.
And he's enhancing and building upon. And
Yeah.
what happens subconsciously is that he has that fear to protect himself. And then
Yep.
when it's all over, he goes, I survived. And I know that I survived. And therefore, I did something right. What did I do? I got scared and I protected myself. Brilliant. Next time, I'm going to get even more scared and I'll definitely survive
Yeah.
again.
I
And
will
it won't
protect
be
myself
survive.
better.
Yes. And actually, what we end up doing is like building on and enhancing that very thing that we don't actually need and isn't serving us in the first place. So,
It's
so
amazing, isn't it?
I've used a couple of different words here, and I've got an idea, in my opinion, what the difference is, but there's definite overlap. We've both said anchor and we've both said trigger. What's the difference between the two? What's a trigger versus an anchor? Because we've something happens, it triggers you to feel that way. So
See, I would believe the trigger being the start of the situation. Okay, so for me, using my buddy's example, the trigger being, we're going to go and see your aunt today. So it starts that moment in your gut when you go, oh no, no, we're going to do this. Whereas I see the anchor as this is it. You're here. You're within this now. So I see the anchor as a choice anchor that we have made of something to connect ourselves to and give us a feeling. Now, weirdly, Duncan, you know that I do magic tricks for a living, and you know that I mess around for a living, and laughter is a massive part of that. I have managed to anchor a table of guests onto a salt pot, and every time I moved the salt pot into a certain place, they would start laughing. Now, the funny thing there is there was comedians on that night. There was me doing magic and there was natural laughter going on. So just as an experiment, whenever the whole group laughed, I would move the salt pot to where I said. And then when the laughing died down, I'd move it back. And it just looked like I was just fiddling with something. But then when I started to perform magic, and at a point that even anyone that loved me to bits would go, well, that's a dull moment. There's no laughter needed. If I moved that salt pot, they all thought it was the time to laugh. And I still think that stuff is just amazing. It really is.
So, a great example of this is being sat in a restaurant and having someone, ideally, so that they're not directly in line of sight, but you're sort of on their periphery, right? So
yeah,
there's a good angle, they can see you, and basically, yeah, mirroring and matching. I think that is that possibly even a topic of a future conversation? Who knows? But yeah, so you basically mirror their behavior. That doesn't necessarily mean mimicking them, right? So they could go and scratch their head and you take a drink, but it's still that same angle of movement. It's still that kind of thing. And then by continuing that enough, you build it up so that there's this sort of rapport and synergy between you, because we love familiar, right? Our brains just adore something that's familiar. And so therefore it automatically builds this kind of link between us. And then from there, I can decide, right, I'm going to stand up now. And you watch the bloke stand up, and he has no idea why he stood up, but he's done it. It's just, it's so fun.
Do you mess around with this stuff?
Go for a meal together, Paul.
Oh,
They shouldn't get outside in public together. That's a terrible idea.
I think that's why people that know us are glad we don't live too close to each other.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Mate, right, so what's your views on triggering versus anchoring?
Yeah, I mean, I think you described it quite well. I think realistically, there's not a lot of difference other than how the words tend to be applied. So when people talk about triggers, they tend to either be talking about the micro steps of a situation with anchors, for example, or in layman's sense, it's quite often used just seen as a negative thing, and people don't necessarily appreciate that there's positives to it as well. So it has a lot of negative connotations, whereas the word anchor very much is used when you're describing an intentional process whereby you've created a trigger that links to that end result. So again, that ties in with what you were saying with actually you build the emotion and you anchor it back to that trigger. So I guess the trigger is the thing that fires off that relationship that you've created that leads to the
right. This is part of why I love coming and chatting with you over so often, because there's so many people who see hypnotherapy as something that you've got to study, you've got to learn, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you can do all this process. Now, you know that I learn by messing around and just trying stuff and doing different things. And when I pick things up from loads of different places, it's actually lovely that I'm able to go, but what's your thoughts on it? Because if you think completely different to me, I'd love to know why, and I'd love to, and for you to turn around and go, actually, mate, you got it, the triggering and the anchoring thing, you're pretty much there, like the books would say. You've got it. So thank you for that, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries. Yes, I like books. Books are great, but I've also known people who have spent a lot of time understanding what a textbook says and very little time understanding a human.
Yeah.
Equally, I know people who have spent an awful lot of time learning, reading, experiencing things that way, and then been able to put it into practice brilliantly. And I know people who have never touched a book that have done amazing things. So it's not just about whether or not, there's no right way. There's probably some wrong ways, but there's no right way. other than what's right for you as an individual.
Do you know what I once had? So I gave a day of instruction for hypnotherapists to learn how a stage hypnotist cheats. Okay.
Nice. Yep.
And I was teaching them magic tricks, and I was teaching them things that you can get away with to build people's belief really quickly and to build rapport in seconds rather than over a few hours. And it was so funny because somebody came along to be a spy to basically write a report as to why this was a load of rubbish. As soon as that person spoke, you could tell they had a massive level of understanding. So I even said to them, look, you don't need this. You've already gained this intuitively. You've worked with people for so long. You don't need all of this. Why are you here? And she came up with a rubbish excuse. And I remember thinking, what a load of twaddle. That wasn't the word I used in my head, but that's what I thought. And then at the end of it, she came over to me and she went, I've got to tell you, I come from this education board, and I was here to find out how rubbish this was and tell people they shouldn't be learning this way. But I agree with everything you said. And it's
there,
like,
there
isn't that lovely?
there is a tendency for experts, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
specifically within the hypnotherapy field, and again, there are always exceptions, generalizations, blah blah blah. But yeah, there is a tendency sometimes for experts to become very elitist and think, oh no, we've gone through this specific process and have learned it this specific way, and this is the correct way.
Gotcha.
And so therefore they're quite ready to dismiss other views, and actually it's other views that give you the chance to learn and understand sometimes even things that are wrong or contradict you, and you look into it and you question it and you still decide that it's wrong. That's fine. But in that process, you can really learn more about yourself and the way that you do things in your approach. So yeah, like, I love people who learn things by doing things, however, in whatever way. And I love having conversations with people who have gone down different routes. Like, when I first learned self-hypnosis, because that's how I got into this, ignoring the fact that prior to that I'd done A-level psychology and stuff, but that's kind of different. But when I first did hypnotherapy, I learned, when I first got into that world, it was through self-hypnosis and learning how to use it for myself. I'd already been interested in like stage show, cheesy magic type stuff. I'm not saying what you do is cheesy, by the way. I'm saying, yeah.
Oh no, I'll say it. Carry on. It's fine.
Excellent. And yeah, so it was learning to use it for myself that kind of really, because before that I thought hypnosis was a load of books. And actually it was after I'd done that, and when I started my hypnotherapy training, during that training I absolutely abused hypnosis with my friends down the pub, right? Not with other people, with my friends who have consented and were absolutely up for it, and it was a good laugh, and there was a few beers, and we'll have some fun. And on the balcony, I would make people do very silly things, and it was great fun. The weirdest one was when I hypnotized someone to think they were me, and then I was watching someone basically doing a really good impersonation of me, and that freaked me out a little bit. I was like,
Was it
whoa.
a good impersonation as well? Did you go, oh?
It was a better me than me. Just,
yeah, that messed my head up.
Yeah, Paul, don't do it. Don't do it. It's really weird.
I do that.
Now, I don't use it that way. I don't even talk about using it that way anymore, mostly because I don't feel it's congruent with what I do and my approach and how I help people now. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think for me personally, I like to keep the two as very separate things. And I've not even dabbled with the entertainment side for a long time.
Mate, do you know what? Something I found really interesting there was you and I started with the same belief that hypnosis wouldn't work.
Yeah. I thought it was a lot of rubbish.
Yeah, I thought.
Until I realised I've been doing it every day anyway. Who knew?
Yeah, you kind of look around and you go, "What an absolute load of twaddle! There is no way that would work. Nobody would be able to do that to me, so therefore it can't work." Okay, that was my view. And I read a lot about self hypnosis because back then there weren't streamable videos you could learn from. And I learned a lot from real people. And the amount of time somebody'd go, all you have to do is, and I'd let, no, it can't be that easy. It can't be that simple. What you're telling me cannot be that simple. And bring it back to anchoring, it really is as simple as we've described.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Good. So go and try it for yourself. Try it with something low level, try it with something comfortable. And if you need help and support, get in touch with us. If you've got any questions, talk to us first or someone else. But for really basic stuff, just try it. Literally, okay, here's a really common thing right now, and in general, people feeling a bit nervous about going out in public, or a bit nervous about picking up the phone, or doing something a bit different, right? Stop, breathe, remember a time when you felt how you do want to feel. Remember some calming experience, really, because your subconscious doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. So let that come forward and feel those feelings. Remember what you felt in that time. Where did you feel it? What was it like? Allow yourself to really experience it. Then do your anchor, which could be pinching your fingers, it could be clicking your fingers, it could be anything you want it to be, right? Something that you can then replicate. Then go and have a glass of water, do something different, come back, do it again. Go away, do something different. Read your phone number out backwards off the top of your head. Yeah, you probably can't. I can't either. But try it, because it just forces that cognitive break where you're doing something different.
So you've just broken my brain now.
Yeah, excellent. Use your postcode. It's shorter. It's easier. Anyway, and then repeat it again. Once you've done it like that a few times, already you're building that you're actually building a new neural pathway in your brain. But let's not go into neuroplasticity right now.
No, I've had a busy week. No.
It's only Monday, Paul. And then allow yourself to feel a little bit nervous. Think about something you're a bit worried about, and then do the trigger and see the anchor follow. See how that calmness as you breathe just comes forward, because you create it for yourself, and it really can be that quick and that simple. Right, we have already waffled for too long again, Paul.
How do we do that? We decide comment come through.
Just in time, we've got a comment. So Jesse, good old Jesse, says, I was taught anchoring as part of a leadership in the military, which is funny because at the time I would not have believed in hypnotherapy and didn't realize it was the same concept. Yeah, absolutely. That last little bit, so true. So much of what I do, because people hear hypnotherapy, they assume like hippie stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with hippie stuff. That's great. Love it. But there's this real kind of disconnect there. Actually, everything I do is very much founded and based in science and stuff that's actually been tested and makes sense and works. You know?
And it works, and we can prove it works really easily, really quickly. Although I'll tell you another time, I'll tell you my favorite quitting smoking story. You remind me, and you'll love it. You'll love it. But we'll do that on another subject.
I think you have told me. It may have been on my podcast, or it may have been on a previous episode of this.
I think it was your podcast now.
Podcast. Was it the guy that his wife?
Yes.
And now for anyone who wants to know more, you're going to have to head to the Mind Affinity podcast, mindaffinity.co.uk/podcast, and check out my chatting with Paul Newton. Nice plug.
Look at that. Nice.
Smooth, right? Smooth. And do you know what? While we're doing plugs, I don't know if you've got anything you want to plug at the minute, Paul, but I'm going to do a quick cheeky plug because tomorrow evening at 8:00, I'm helping people sleep. Sleep is so vital and important, and it makes such a difference. It creates a foundation for you to be more resilient and la-di-da-di-da. But we're rubbish at doing it generally as a population, and I want to help people change that. So head to mindaffinity.co.uk/sleep better and sign up for my free webinar. It's completely free. It's about an hour long, and then questions and answers afterwards. If you want to stay on, there'll be a replay available for anyone who attends. There's a free ebook and loads of follow-up stuff, but you don't need me to waffle about it. Just hit the link, don't hit the link, type the link, and head there and check it out and share it with anyone you know who needs to sleep better. Paul, have you got anything you want to plug right now?
Yes, I have. Well, there's always Newton's
nuggets in front of us.
Yeah, I can throw my nuggets out if you want. It should just be wrong. There's always Newton's Nuggets. Just go to wherever you download podcasts and type in Newton's Nuggets and you'll find us. But something that we've recently launched, we've only just launched this, is the Mental Theft Club. So if you go to www.mentaltheft.club, that is going to be where people can have access to me and to Jesse and my team of people who are going to be constantly updating with scams that are going on, and we're going to try and stop those scammers from being able to get you. And it's a ridiculous price. Duncan, ask me how ridiculously expensive it is.
How ridiculously expensive is it, Paul?
£5
for
a month's membership. You get £5, and we're constantly updating stuff.
Crazy.
So, yeah, it is, mate. And all these things, if we can help, and I know Duncan's the same, if we can help, just get in touch. We will. There you go.
Excellent. Paul, thank you so much. We've only waffled on for an extra 36 minutes this time. So not too bad.
One day we will finish at the half hour.
Indeed we shall. Right. Here's the outro scene. I don't have an outro screen, so we're just going to sit here and awkwardly wave until it finishes the live broadcast.
Do you remember when you were a kid at school and the presenters would just be doing that for ages?
Yeah, let's do it. Ready, Paul?